My name is Sienna Spencer. I'm 32 years old. Last Thanksgiving, my mother posted in our family group chat with 23 relatives. Sienna, you're not really one of us. Stop trying. Then she removed me. For 15 years, she had already erased me from 36 out of 38 family photographs, cropped, photoshopped, and thrown away like I never existed. The daughter with the faint scar on her lip was never allowed to ruin the picture. 11 months later, on my wedding day in Asheville, the same woman marched in with all 38 uninvited relatives and demanded the front row like she owned the aisle. I stepped aside quietly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. What she didn't know was that this time, I was ready. The officiant leaned toward the microphone, looked straight at my mother and said, "Ma'am, before we begin, the groom asked me to show everyone something. If this is already hitting you somewhere private, please take a moment to subscribe. I write these stories because someone has to keep the receipts, and this channel grows only when stories like mine get heard. Drop your city and the hour you're listening from in the comments. I read everyone. I'm Sienna. This is the story of how a single sentence in November set my mother up to lose the only thing she ever loved more than her children. The picture. Let me take you back to that Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Let me start with a smaller scene though, because the loud ones never tell you who a person actually is. 6 weeks before that Thanksgiving, I was sitting on the carpet of a pediatric therapy room in Charlotte, North Carolina, across from a 4-year-old boy named Eli. Eli has a cleft palate. The surgical repair sits high under his upper lip, faint and pink, in a place most strangers will eventually stop noticing. I have one in the same place. Mine is 2 millimeters longer. I have measured it. I was 11 years old when I first put a ruler against my own mouth in the YMCA changing room and learned its length. 0.8 of a centimeter. Small enough that strangers do not see it. Big enough that my mother spent 28 years pretending it was a personal failure of mine. That Tuesday, I was teaching Eli to say 2 words. Thank you. For a child with his anatomy, the TH and the Y sit on opposite ends of a wide bridge of tongue. We had been working for 9 weeks. He pressed his lips together, then released them. Air, then sound. Then, on the 7th try, 2 whole syllables I could understand. Thank you. His mother put one hand over her mouth and started to cry. His father stood up from the chair like he had been struck. I sat very still and did not look at either of them, because if I had, I would have started crying too. And not for Eli. I would have cried because for 32 years, no one had ever cried over a word that came out of my mouth. My mother had cried over my mouth itself. Twice, that I remember. Both times when I was small. Both times into a mirror she was holding above my face. My name, again, is Sienna Spencer. I am a senior speech pathologist at the Carolina Pediatric Voice Clinic. My business cards say MS, CCC, SLP after my name. I picked this specialty on purpose. My fiancé thinks it was the most stubborn thing I have ever done. I think it was the only thing I could do. That night, I went home to my apartment in Plaza Midwood. 2 bedrooms, brick walls, a gas fireplace that worked exactly half the time. On the bookshelf in the living room, there was a white Adidas shoebox with a yellow streak down the side. Inside the shoebox were 10 birthday cards. One for every 12th of March, from 2015 to 2024. All in the same handwriting, all unsigned. Each one had a small star drawn in the bottom right corner in dark navy pen. I did not know who sent them. I had stopped asking. For 10 years I had told myself the same gentle lie, that some elderly relative had mixed up addresses, that some old family friend had a soft spot for the girl no one talked about. I never asked the question out loud because I was afraid of 2 answers. One, that it was someone in my family, and they would deny it. 2, that it was no one in my family at all, and the only person in the world who ever remembered my birthday had been a stranger. The cards mattered to me in a way I did not want my mother to know they mattered to me. Hudson came over that night with takeout from the Thai place on Central Avenue. He set the bag on the kitchen counter and looked at me the way a documentary photographer looks at a subject. Slow, full attention, no flinching. We had been engaged since the 14th of February. The ring was small and old. It had belonged to his grandmother. He had asked me to marry him without a speech, sitting on a bench outside a coffee shop in Davidson. Bad day? He asked. I had not said a word about my day. My patient said thank you for the first time, I said. That's not a bad day. It's not. He waited. He always waits. That, more than any other thing, is what saved me. I opened my phone. My mother had added me to a new group chat. 23 relatives. The chat was called Spencer Thanksgiving 2024, with a turkey emoji at the end. The timestamp read 7:14 p.m. I read what she had typed. I set the phone face down on the counter. I did not pick it up again that night. To explain what happened in that group chat, I have to explain my mother. And to explain my mother, I have to explain a pageant. In 1985, my mother won first runner-up in the Miss North Carolina pageant. The crown went to a girl from Greenville. My mother, Pamela Ann Spencer, went home with a sash, a scholarship to a school she never attended, and a clipping she still keeps framed in the powder room of the house in Raleigh where I grew up. She married my father, Wendell Spencer, 16 months later. He was an orthodontist with a quiet practice in Cary. He loved her in the way some men love beautiful women, by getting out of the way of the spotlight. I was born on the 12th of March, 1993. I had a unilateral cleft lip and palate. The surgeons at Duke Children's closed the lip when I was 3 months old, and the palate just past my first birthday. I was lucky. The repair was clean. The scar across my upper lip is a faint pink seam that fades a little more every year. By the time I was 9, my pediatric dentist had to lean in to see it. My mother could see it from across a room. I have one photograph of myself at 6 months old. Margot Hayes took it. Margot was the photographer my mother hired in 1995 to document our family, and she stayed in that job for 15 years. The photograph is from a session in our backyard, before Margot was officially on the payroll. I am wearing a white knit cardigan with a small bow at the collar. I am laughing. My upper lip is still healing, pink and tender, and you can see it clearly because I am laughing. My mother never put that photograph in a frame. She put it in a drawer. I found it when I was 12, looking for stamps. My younger sister Brooke was born on the 8th of April, 1997, when I was 4 years old. I remember the day they brought her home from UNC Hospital because my mother said one sentence to my father in the kitchen that I have never forgotten. Now we have a real Spencer girl. I did not understand what she meant. I was 4. I went up to my room and sat on the carpet and waited for someone to tell me what that meant about me. No one came. I have an older brother too. Tate. 5 years older than me. He learned early that the safest place in our house was beside my mother. He learned to laugh at her jokes about my mouth. By the time he was 16, he was no longer my brother. He was her son. There was a country club in Raleigh called Cedar Hollow, where my mother served on the hospitality committee for 23 years. Cedar Hollow had a quarterly newsletter. The newsletter ran family photographs of board members. The first photograph of me in that newsletter was from a junior gala when I was 8 years old. I wore a pink dress. I stood next to Brooke, who was 4. The photograph was taken by a club staff member with a basic camera. The week after, when the newsletter arrived in our mailbox, I saw my own face on page 7, and I saw that the scar on my upper lip was no longer there. A staff member with average Photoshop skills had smoothed it away. I was 8. I did not know the word for what had been done to me. I only knew the photograph was wrong. I took the newsletter into the dining room. I set it on the table next to a framed copy of the same photograph my mother had displayed on the buffet. The two pictures were not the same. I sat there for 9 minutes counting the differences. Then I folded the newsletter and put it in my dresser drawer under the white cardigan. My mother walked past the dining room twice during those 9 minutes. She saw me. She said nothing. When I was 16, at Thanksgiving in 2009, my mother's sister Marlene said in a low voice to my mother, "Sienna turned out okay considering." My mother answered without lowering her voice at all. "She tries. But she isn't really one of us. We've accepted it." I was 3 meters away. I had been pouring cranberry sauce into a serving dish. I finished pouring. I set the can down on the counter. I went up the back stairs to my bedroom, stood in front of the mirror over my dresser, and for the first time in my life I put my fingers on the scar on my upper lip. I asked the mirror a question I had been holding for 11 years. Is this the reason? The mirror, like my mother, did not answer. I learned that night that silence was cheaper than fighting. I would pay for that lesson for the next 16 years. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving 2024 was a normal night until it wasn't. I was making pasta, marinara from a jar. I had stopped cooking real meals when I lived alone because real meals are for two. Hudson was in Greenville on assignment for a documentary about a closing textile mill, and he wasn't back until Friday. My phone buzzed at 7:14 p.m. on the counter, screen face up. I had been added to a group chat. The chat was named Spencer Thanksgiving 2024 with a turkey emoji. My mother was the admin. There were 23 people in it. I counted them. My father, Wendell, my brother, Tate, and his ex-wife, Brittany. She was still in the family chats for some reason that involved their daughter, Brooke, Aunt Marlene, Aunt Diane, 3 uncles, 4 spouses, 5 Spencer cousins, 2 cousins by marriage from Carrie, a family friend named Cassandra Whitlock, who had been to every Thanksgiving since 1986. The first message was a logistics note: cocktail hour at 5, dinner at 7, dress code navy, my mother's preferred Spencer color. I started typing, "I'll bring green bean casserole," the dish I had brought for 10 years. I had it half-typed when the second message came through. My mother typed, "Just keeping this year intimate, you know how it is. Sienna, sweetie, you're not really one of us. Stop trying." The heart at the end was the part that bent me forward over the counter. I waited. I do not know what I was waiting for. Maybe for someone to type a question mark. Maybe for someone to type, "Pam, that's harsh," or "Pamela, behave." Maybe for my father, just once in my life, to type my name out loud. I waited about 14 seconds. The seconds were long. Aunt Marlene reacted with a thumbs up. Cousin Whitney reacted with a red heart, the same emoji my mother had used. Aunt Diane reacted with a laughing, crying face. 2 other relatives reacted with thumbs up. My father did not react. Brooke did not react. Tate did not react. Cassandra Whitlock did not react. Which surprised me because she always had something to say. 13 reactions in total. No words from anyone defending me. No words from anyone questioning the line. The chat moved on to a discussion of whether Aunt Diane should bring her sweet potato pie, or whether someone else would handle dessert. I left the chat. I screenshotted the entire conversation. I sent it to one person, Hudson. Then I sat down at the kitchen island and ate the pasta out of the pan because dirtying a plate felt like more than I could do. What I did not do was cry. I want you to know that. I did not cry. I went into my notes app and typed one line. Thanksgiving 2024. Uninvited from family. Saved screenshot. No emotion in the words because the emotion was in my chest and I did not have anywhere to put it down. Hudson called me 43 minutes later. He was driving. I could hear the wet sound of his tires on the highway. "I'm coming home," he said. "You're 3.5 hours away." "I'm coming home." He pulled into my building at 10:48 p.m. with a bottle of Glenlivet 18, 2 glasses he had grabbed from a gas station, and the screenshot I had sent him printed out on a single sheet of paper. He had printed it. He had stopped at his sister's place in Greensboro on the way and printed my mother's words on plain copy paper because he wanted the words to exist on something he could hold. He sat on my couch and read the screenshot for 4 minutes. I sat on the floor across from him with my back against the coffee table because the floor felt safer than the couch. I am 32 years old, and I sat on the floor like a child. I did not apologize for that. When he looked up from the paper, he did not say what I expected. He did not say, "I'm sorry." He did not say, "She's wrong about you." He did not say, "We'll cut her out." He said, "Sienna, has your mother ever put you in a single-family photograph?" I looked at him. I opened my mouth. I closed it. "I don't know," I said. "I've never counted." He poured a small whiskey into each glass. He handed mine over. He took a sip from his. "Then I'll count," he said. "And after I count, we're going to decide what to do about it." He did not say revenge. He did not say lawsuit. He did not say cut her out. He said decide. The word he chose mattered to me then. It still matters to me now. It took Hudson 5 weeks to count. He started on the 1st of December and finished on the 5th of January. He pulled every Cedar Hollow Country Club quarterly newsletter from the last 15 years. Back issues lived on the club's password-protected member page, which I still had access to as the daughter of a member in good standing. He pulled every Junior League of Raleigh program from the same 15 years. He pulled the Raleigh Society magazine spread on Brooks' debutante ball from 2015. He pulled every Christmas card my mother had mailed since 2010 because she had kept paper copies in a binder in her dining room sideboard, and Brooke, who was home for Christmas, sent us photographs of every page. Brooke did not know what we were doing yet. She thought we were planning a slideshow surprise for the rehearsal dinner. Hudson also pulled my mother's public Facebook album, which had 361 photographs spanning 15 years. He built a spreadsheet. 1 row per official family photograph. Columns for date, source, who was in it, who was missing, and whether the missing person should have been there. The standard was simple. If the photograph was taken at an event I attended, and I was not in the published version, I had been removed. When he finished, the spreadsheet had 38 rows. I appeared in 2 of them. 2. The first was a candid the Raleigh News and Observer ran from a charity gala in 2014. The photographer caught me handing a microphone to Tate. My mother had no editorial control over the paper, so the photograph ran. The second was a group shot of UNC's speech-language pathology graduating class in May 2018, posted on the university's official site. My mother had no control over the university either. Every other photograph my family had ever published, 36 of 38, had been edited to remove me. Sometimes I had been cropped. Sometimes I had been photoshopped out and replaced with a chair, a centerpiece, or empty grass. Sometimes I had been staged out of the frame before the picture was taken, but the place where I should have been was still visible, if you knew to look. Hudson showed me the spreadsheet on a Saturday afternoon in mid-January. We were sitting at my dining table. He had printed the whole thing on letter paper and laid it out in chronological order. The pages stretched from one end of the table to the other. I stood up and walked along the row of them like I was walking past tombstones. "There's a photographer," he said quietly. "Most families have one. The one who shoots every Christmas, every birthday, every gala. The one who sees everything before it's curated. If she's still around, she'll have the originals." "Her name is Margot," I said. "Margot Hayes. She lives in Greensboro. My mother stopped using her in 2010 and I don't know why." "I'll find her," Hudson said. He found her in 14 days. He found her through a private forum on the North Carolina Documentary Photographers Guild, where a younger photographer named Ross Whitman recognized the Spencer name and wrote back in a private message. "Spencer of Raleigh? You'll want to call Margot Hayes. She shot them for 15 years and walked off the job in 2010. She still has every file." We drove the hour and 45 minutes from Charlotte to Greensboro on the second Saturday in February. Margot was 62. She lived in a Tudor-style brick house on a street lined with sycamores. She opened the door, looked at me for 4 seconds, and said the thing that made every cell in my body stop. "You're Sienna. You grew up." She led us upstairs to a small office. She opened a cherrywood cabinet. Inside the cabinet were 4 external Western digital hard drives, each 4 terabytes, each labeled in her precise handwriting. Spencer, 1995, 1999. Spencer, 2000, 2004. Spencer, 2005, 2009. Spencer, 2010. "I have been waiting 15 years," she said, "for someone to ask me about this." Margot made tea. English breakfast. The mug she gave me was thick blue ceramic with a chip on the rim. She made me hold it before she opened the drives, like she wanted my hands to be busy when I saw what was inside. The first drive she opened was 2005-2009. She scrolled to a folder marked Spencer Family, 2008, Originals. Inside were 112 photographs from one Christmas alone. She opened the 7th one, a formal Christmas card portrait. Pamela, Wendell, Tate, Brooke, and me. I was 15. I was standing on the end, slightly behind Tate, my hand resting on his shoulder. I had no idea this photograph existed. "This was the original," Margot said. "Now look at the version your mother used." She opened another folder marked Spencer Family, 2008. Published. The same Christmas card. Same room, same furniture, same tree. Pamela, Wendell, Tate, Brooke. The space where I had been standing was empty. The Photoshop was good enough that the only person who would notice was someone who had been there. I had been there. I sat down in the office chair because my legs did the polite thing legs do when the body underneath them gives out. "There's more," Margot said gently. "But before I show you the photographs, there's something I think you need to see first." She opened a folder called Email, Cassandra Chain, October 2008. Inside was a PDF screenshot, 1 page, a reply all email chain from the 14th of October, 2008. Cassandra Whitlock had emailed my mother asking for a photograph of Brooke for a Miss North Carolina pageant alumni brochure. Brooke was 11. Cassandra was preparing materials about pageant moms and their daughters. My mother was a former runner-up. Cassandra needed a picture. Margot had been CC'd from the start of the chain because she was the person who would actually have to send the photograph file. That was routine. My mother replied to the chain at 4:23 in the afternoon. She replied to all. The screenshot showed every recipient. She wrote, "Cass, attaching the Brooke photo you wanted. She is stunning. Honestly, she's the one we always wanted. Sienna is the disappointment we don't talk about. Thank God we got Brooke. The doctors said the scar would fade, but it never really did. She knows. We don't pretend anymore. Love, Pam." I read it twice. I read it a third time. The phrase "she knows" was the worst phrase. Because I had not known. I had suspected. I had measured. I had cried into pillows at 13. But I had not known with the kind of certainty that comes from your mother writing the words down. Margot put her hand over mine on the desk. Not a squeeze. Just a hand. "Your mother forgot I was on the chain," she said. She only saw Cassandra's name at the top. She typed for about 20 seconds. Then she clicked send. 20 seconds of typing. 15 years of consequence. I kept that PDF because I am 62 years old, and I have lived long enough to know that women like your mother always think someone like me is invisible. I did not cry in Margot's office. I want to be clear about that. I did not cry. I asked her 2 questions in this order. How many photographs do you have where I was removed from the published version? 36. And the published total over 15 years? 38. I held the mug. I thought about the math. I thought about how a number that small can hold a whole childhood inside it. Then I asked the question that mattered most. Will you let me use these? Margot stood up. She walked to the cabinet. She unplugged all 4 drives, coiled the cables with the calm of a woman who has been preparing this gesture for a decade, and placed the drives in a small black canvas bag. They were always yours, she said. I was just keeping them safe. We drove home that night in silence for the first 30 miles. Then Hudson said one sentence. We need a forensic specialist. We hired a man named Theo Marsh out of Raleigh. He had done photographic authentication work for the FBI's Charlotte field office for 9 years before going private. His fee for full metadata authentication on 38 photograph pairs, including a notarized 23-page report admissible in civil court, came to $6,800. Hudson offered to split it. I said no. I had been putting money away for 10 years, a little out of every paycheck, toward a down payment on a first house. I had a number in my savings account that I had once thought was my safety net. I looked at the number that morning and decided that a house could wait. A house can always wait. The truth could not. Theo's report came back in late August. Every published photograph had been altered using Photoshop CS3 through CS6. The metadata for the alterations traced back to a single Adobe workstation registered in Wake County, North Carolina, between 2003 and 2010. The IP address belonged to my parents' home network. The user account belonged to Pamela Spencer. Hudson rolled the report up like a newspaper. He looked at me across the dining room table. The light through the window was the soft kind that makes everything look further away than it is. What do you want to do with this? He asked. I thought about the wedding. October 18th was already on the calendar. The save the dates had gone out in June. My mother had not been on the list. She had emailed me once saying, "We'll see, sweetheart." And I had not replied. I thought for a long time. We wait, I said, until October. Before I tell you what I did next, let me ask you something. If you were sitting where I was sitting, with 23 pages of forensic proof in front of you and an email from your own mother saying you were the disappointment your family didn't talk about, what would you do with all of it? Burn it? File it in a lawsuit? Confront her quietly at a coffee shop and walk away? Drop your answer in the comments. I'll tell you what I did. But first, I have to tell you about a phone call from someone I never expected to take my side. The call came on a Tuesday in early July, around 4 in the afternoon. I was between patients. My phone screen read, Brooke. I almost did not answer. We had spoken 6 times in the previous decade, all of them awkward, all of them at family gatherings where she would be polite for 90 seconds and then drift away to wherever our mother was standing. I answered. Sienna. Her voice was low and quick. I need to talk to your fiancé. I did not understand what she had said. You want me to put Hudson on the phone? No, I need to meet him, alone. I can drive down tomorrow. Don't tell Mom. We did not even discuss why. I gave her Hudson's number. She hung up before I could ask a single question. They met the next afternoon at Jubala Coffee on Hillsborough Street in Raleigh. She wore a denim jumpsuit and round wire-rimmed glasses and folded her napkin into a square 3 times before she could speak. Hudson told me later that she sat down across from him and the first words out of her mouth were the ones I will carry the rest of my life. Has my sister ever told you she gets a birthday card every year? Unsigned? Hudson had not known. Brooke reached into her bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. On the paper, drawn in dark navy pen, were 10 small 5-pointed stars in a vertical column. The exact same star, the same pen, the same hand. The same drift in the line at the top right of every point. She told him she had drawn the first one when she was 17 years old. She had been looking through one of our mother's family albums. The leather-bound ones our mother kept in the den. She started counting. She counted Brooke 52 times across 15 years of photographs. She counted me 11 times. That night, in March 2015, the night before my 22nd birthday, she drove to a CVS in Cary and bought a card with a star on the front. She wrote nothing inside. She drew the star at the bottom corner because she wanted me to know it was the same person every year, but she did not dare sign her name. She mailed it from a post office in Durham so the postmark would not match our family's neighborhood. She told Hudson she had been terrified. Not of being caught, of what our mother would do to me if our mother knew Brooke loved me. Brooke had grown up watching what happened to the daughter who was loved less. She did not want our mother to find a second target. So for 10 years, she stayed quiet. And for 10 years, she sent a card. When I met her at my apartment the following week, I did not say hello at the door. I went to my bookshelf, took down the Adidas shoebox, and set the 10 cards on the kitchen table in chronological order. Then I took the sheet of paper she had brought and laid it next to them. 10 stars. Same hand. Same pen. Same shape. She put her hand over her mouth. She didn't cry. She did the thing my mother had done in the email, pressed her own mouth like the words might escape and finish her. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was a coward." I shook my head. I did not say it's okay. It was not okay. But it was not her fault either. "Brooke," I said, "walk me down the aisle." She looked at me for a long time. Then she said the sentence she had been holding for 10 years. "I have been planning to ask you that since I was 21. Please, let me." She moved out of our mother's house 6 weeks later. Our mother called her 14 times in 3 days. The last text my mother sent her was screenshotted and forwarded to me at 11:10 the same night, with one word from Brooke. "See?" My mother had written, "Brooke, you're the one we kept. Don't do this. You're the one we kept." 3 words I had felt my entire life, finally spoken in a language that left no room for doubt. October 18th, 2025 was a Saturday in Asheville. The venue was a small resort called Blue Ridge Ridgeline, tucked into the side of a mountain about 20 minutes from downtown. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock in a glass-walled chapel that looked out over the Blue Ridge Range. 204 guests. The seating chart had been finalized in September. My mother was not on it. My father was not on it. Tate was not on it. Brooke was on it 3 times. Once as my maid of honor, once as my walking partner, and once at the head table. I woke up at 6 in the morning. Mountain fog hung against the glass like wet linen. I drank coffee from a paper cup and watched the light come up over the mountains because my mother was 3 hours and 50 minutes away in Raleigh and did not yet know that today was the last day I would ever wonder what she thought of me. I had decided, 2 weeks earlier, what to wear under the dress. A small cotton handkerchief embroidered with the initials of my father Wendell's mother. She had died when I was 11. She had been the only person in the Spencer family who held my face with both hands when I came into a room. I tucked the handkerchief into the bodice over my heart and let the bodice close over it. At 7:30 that morning, my mother gathered 38 relatives in the parking lot of Cedar Hollow Country Club in Raleigh. I learned this part from Aunt Marlene later. My mother had spent the previous 3 weeks calling everyone on her side of the family. She had been telling them, in a voice she had practiced, that I was planning to publicly defame the family at my wedding. That I had hired lawyers. That if the Spencer family did not appear as a united front, my mother said, the entire family's reputation would be destroyed. She used the words, entire family reputation, in 14 separate phone calls. Marlene counted because Marlene wrote them down. Some of them did not believe her. Most of them did not particularly want to drive to Asheville, but Pamela Spencer was the woman who hosted Christmas dinner. She was the one who organized the rotation of holiday meals. She was the one whose disapproval could remove a niece from a guest list, a grandchild from a play date, a cousin from a gallery wall. They came because the cost of not coming was higher than the cost of a Saturday in October. 7 cars left Raleigh at 8 in the morning, my mother in the lead Lexus, my father in the passenger seat. My father had not said anything in the planning. He had agreed to come because she had asked. My wedding planner was a woman named Adeline Cromwell. She called me at 12:34 in the afternoon while I was being zipped into my dress. Sienna, there are 38 people at the front gate. They are not on the list. The woman in front is wearing a white blazer. She just walked past the registration table without stopping. I set the makeup brush down on the vanity. Open the gate, I said. Don't argue with her, don't escalate. Let her in. Let her sit wherever she wants. Put extra chairs in the front row if she needs them. Adeline was quiet for 4 seconds. Are you sure? Adeline, I said. Everything has been prepared. At 2:12 in the afternoon, my mother marched into the chapel with 38 relatives behind her like a parade. She did not ask for a seat. She walked directly down the aisle to the front row and placed her Hermes bag on the center chair, as if it had been reserved for her since the previous summer. My father sat down 2 seats away. He did not look at her. Her brother-in-law Curtis set up 13 folding chairs along the outside edge of the front row, leaning them against the chapel wall when there was no room left. My mother adjusted her blazer, the white Carolina Herrera blazer she had worn to Brooke's debutante ball 10 years earlier. She held up her phone and waved at cousin Whitney to take a photograph of just her at the front. She told Whitney to send it to her before the ceremony started. Behind the velvet curtain at the back of the chapel, I watched her through a 6-inch gap. I counted the heads behind her. 38. 38 people. Exactly the number of family photographs she had spent 15 years trying to crop me out of. I do not know if she noticed the math. I doubt she did. But the universe did. The universe had been keeping score for a long time. I touched the faint scar on my upper lip for the first time in my adult life, without meaning to hide it. Let her sit, I said to no one. Today isn't about a chair. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 4 o'clock. At 3:59, Adeline's assistant moved quietly along the rows of folding chairs in the front section and slipped a craft paper envelope under every seat. 40 envelopes. Each envelope contained one photograph from Theo Marsh's report, one printout of the Cassandra email PDF, and one screenshot of the Thanksgiving group chat from the previous November. My mother did not notice the assistant. She was facing forward, adjusting her blazer, fielding compliments from her cousin to her left. At 4 o'clock, the lights in the chapel dimmed. The string quartet stopped tuning. Reverend Glenn Atherton, 64 years old, in a navy clerical robe, walked from the side door to the wooden pulpit at the front of the chapel. He had officiated 400 weddings in his 40-year career, mostly Methodist, all in the Triangle. He had retired from his pulpit in Durham 2 years before. He had said yes to officiating my wedding the first time Brooke called him. He adjusted the microphone. He looked out over the chapel. He looked, very deliberately, at my mother in the center of the front row. He spoke the line my entire wedding had been built around. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "before we begin the ceremony, the groom has asked me to show everyone something. Please turn your attention to the screen behind me." A 12-foot LED screen lit up at the front wall of the chapel. The lights stayed dim. The chapel went quiet. The slideshow began. Photograph 1, Easter Sunday, 2010. On the left side of the screen, the published version that ran in the Cedar Hollow newsletter. Pamela, Wendell, Tate, and Brooke, in front of an azalea bush. On the right side, the original, taken by Margot. Same azalea bush, same family, but this version had a 5th person. A teenager, 17 years old, with her hand on Brooke's shoulder. Me. 5 seconds. The next pair appeared. Photograph 2, Christmas 2011. Left, 4 people around a tree. Right, 5. Photograph 3, Pamela's 50th birthday gala. Left, the family at the head table. Right, the same family, with me seated at the end of the table holding a glass of sparkling cider. By the 5th pair, the front row had stopped fidgeting. By the 10th pair, Aunt Marlene had her hand pressed against her chest. By the 15th pair, no one in the chapel was breathing audibly. There were no whispers, no coughing. The string quartet sat with their instruments down. The flower girl, 4 years old, sat on the lap of her mother and watched the screen with her thumb in her mouth. Photograph 19, Christmas card 2018. The version the family had mailed to 200 Cedar Hollow members. 4 people around a holiday mantle. On the right side, the same room, the same mantle. But on the right side, where the published version showed nothing but a velvet stocking, there was a 25-year-old woman in a green sweater. Me. The faint scar on my upper lip was visible because I was laughing. The version on the left had photoshopped me out and replaced me with a stocking that did not even match the others. Aunt Marlene made a sound I had never heard a person make before. She had reacted with a thumbs up to my mother's group chat 11 months earlier. She had eaten the meal I had been uninvited from. She had not slept well since. I learned that later too. Photograph 38, the most recent, a Cedar Hollow gala from May 2024, 6 months before Thanksgiving. The published version showed Pamela, Wendell, Tate, Brooke, Aunt Diane, and 3 cousins. The original showed all of them, plus me. I was wearing a charcoal dress. I had attended that gala because my father had asked me to. The photograph had been taken by an event photographer Hudson had located through Theo Marsh, who still had the high-resolution original. The image held on the screen for 12 seconds instead of 5, then the screen went black. The chapel was silent. Reverend Atherton waited for the silence to settle into the floor. Then he raised his voice. Just enough. The Spencer family, he said, has not been complete in print for 15 years. Tonight, we begin by completing it. My mother tried to stand up. My father, my passive, polite, deferential father, placed one hand on her wrist and held her down. It was the first time in 32 years I had seen my father stop her from doing anything. From the side of the chapel, Brooke stood from her place in the bridesmaids' row. She wore a navy bridesmaid dress and held a folded sheet of paper. She walked the 11 steps to the pulpit. Reverend Atherton handed her the microphone. Brooke unfolded the paper. Her hands did not shake. My name is Brooke Spencer, she said. I am the bride's sister. For 10 years I have been mailing her anonymous birthday cards every March. I drew a small star on each one so she would know it was the same person, but I never signed my name. I was afraid of what our mother would do if she knew I loved Sienna. I watched what our mother did to Sienna my entire childhood, and I was too young, and too afraid, to stop it. I have been planning to walk Sienna down this aisle since I was 21 years old. I am 28 now. I am not asking permission. I am walking my sister down this aisle today. She set the microphone on the pulpit. She did not look at our mother. Reverend Atherton picked the microphone up again. He was holding a single sheet of paper. He looked again at my mother. In October 2008, he said, Sienna's mother sent an email she did not realize was being archived. With Sienna's permission, I am going to read one sentence. He paused for 3 seconds. Then he read it. Sienna is the disappointment we don't talk about. Thank God we got Brooke. A long quiet. Then he said, under your chairs you will find an envelope. Inside is a printout of that email, one of the photographs you have just seen, and a screenshot of a family group chat from the 28th of November, 2024. The forensic authentication of all of the photographs has been filed with the family's legal counsel by Theo Marsh of Marsh Visual Authentication in Raleigh. You are welcome to read further at your discretion. The sound of 40 envelopes being lifted from beneath chairs was the loudest sound the chapel had ever held. My mother did not lift hers. She sat very straight. Her hands rested on her knees. The white blazer did not move. Reverend Atherton looked toward the back of the chapel, where I had been waiting all afternoon behind the velvet curtain. He nodded once. Now, he said, we may begin the ceremony. The string quartet picked up their instruments. They played the first note of the processional. Brooke came to the back of the chapel. She took my hand. 39 steps, she said softly. I counted them this morning. Walk with me. We walked the aisle together. 39 steps. Brooke counted them in her head, and I felt each count in the squeeze of her fingers. Halfway down, I glanced left. My mother was looking forward, not at me, not at the screen, not at anyone. Her eyes were the eyes of a woman watching a building burn that she had set the match to. When we passed Aunt Marlene reached out from her seat and touched my forearm with 3 fingers. Her eyes were wet. Her voice cracked when she said the words, "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." I did not stop walking. I nodded once. I forgave nothing in that moment. I noted that an apology had been offered. That was a beginning. Cousin Whitney stood up suddenly from the front row and walked out the side door of the chapel. She did not look at me as she passed. Tate, my brother, stood up next, the way men do when they think they should follow a sister out of a room. But halfway down the aisle, he stopped. He turned. He looked at me, walking arm in arm with Brooke. He did not say anything. He did not sit back down. He stood there, in the middle of the aisle for the rest of the processional, and then he moved to the back wall of the chapel and remained standing for the entire ceremony. At the altar, Hudson took my hand. He had been watching me since I stepped into the doorway. His eyes had not moved. Reverend Atherton led us through the vows. We had written our own. Hudson went first. "Sienna, I take you as you have always been, not as anyone tried to crop you to be. I take the original. I take the laughing 7-month-old in the white cardigan. I take the 8-year-old who counted the differences between the framed photograph and the newsletter. I take the 11-year-old with the ruler in the YMCA bathroom. I take the woman who teaches 4-year-olds how to say thank you. I take all of you. I will spend the rest of my life refusing to let anyone with a pair of scissors near you." I had not known he was going to say it like that. I went next. "Hudson, I take you as the first person who ever looked at my face and did not reach for a tool to change it. You took out a spreadsheet instead of a denial. You drove 3 hours and 45 minutes through a winter night to print a screenshot on a piece of paper because you wanted my mother's words to exist on something I could hold. I take the photographer. I take the man who counts. I take the witness. We exchanged rings. We were declared married at 5:11 in the afternoon. The chapel did not erupt in applause. The chapel let out a long, slow breath, like a room recovering from a held storm. My mother stood up. She did not look at me. She did not look at my father. She picked up her Hermes bag. She walked down the aisle in the opposite direction of where Brooke and I had walked 39 steps earlier. Her heels were quiet on the wooden floor. The chapel doors opened in front of her, and she walked out into the late afternoon mountain light. 9 of the 38 relatives stood up and followed her. 29 did not. The 29 sat very still in their folding chairs, holding their envelopes, looking at the floor. My father stayed in his seat. He looked at the back of his own hand for a long time. Then he looked up at me on the altar. And he did something he had never done in my entire life. He nodded. Once. Slowly. I do not know if that nod meant I'm sorry. I do not know if it meant I always knew. I do not know if it meant I should have done something 30 years ago. I have decided, in the months since, that it meant all 3. The reception was in the resort dining hall. There was a band. There was cake. There was a slow dance with Hudson under string lights on a wooden deck that faced the mountains. Brooke danced with our father for one song. Aunt Marlene cried into a champagne flute and apologized to me 3 more times. Each time I said the same thing. I said thank you. I said it gently. I did not say it is okay. I did not lie to her. I did not lie to anyone that night. At 10 past 10 in the evening, Tate walked across the dance floor and stopped beside my table. He did not sit. He set a single envelope on the white tablecloth in front of me. He did not say a word. He walked away. I opened the envelope in the bathroom of the resort, sitting on a velvet stool that smelled like lavender. Inside was a 4x6 photograph, a darkroom print Margot had once made and given to him as a child. The photograph was from 2003. Tate was 13. I was 10. We were sitting on the back steps of our house, both of us looking up at a camera. Tate was showing me how to hold his first camera, an old Canon AE1. I was leaning toward him with my whole body, my faint scar visible because I was laughing, his hand on my hand around the camera. On the back of the photograph he had written, in pencil, "I remember this. Forgive me when you can. Not before. If you have ever had to step aside silently while someone tried to take a day that was yours, type one word in the comments. Just one. Type stepped. That word is for you. It is for me too. There is still one chapter of this story left. What happens to a woman like my mother when the picture finally tells the truth? Stay with me. What happens next is not loud. None of it is loud. That is the part you have to understand. In the first week of November, 18 days after the wedding, Reverend Atherton received a private call from Philip Carrington, the chairman of the Cedar Hollow Country Club board. Philip was asking, courteously and off the record, whether Reverend Atherton would be willing to share copies of the materials that had been distributed at the ceremony. He explained that the board had received 7 of the envelopes by hand from concerned members. He explained that the board took member conduct seriously when it crossed certain lines. He did not say which lines. He did not need to. 2 weeks later, the hospitality committee chairmanship that my mother had held for 23 years went up for rotation. There was no announcement, no scandal, no letter. The new chair was a woman from Nightdale who had been waiting in the wings for 6 years. My mother received a short, polite email from Philip thanking her for her service. It did not invite her to continue in any other capacity. In January, her annual dues renewal letter did not arrive in the mail. She called the membership office 3 times. No one returned her calls. 23 years of membership ended in the way she had ended my belonging, through a slow, deliberate silence she could not protest, because protesting would draw the wrong kind of attention. In December, the Junior League of Raleigh quietly removed her name as the chair of their holiday luncheon. They sent a tactful note explaining that they wished to rotate leadership. She was still welcome to attend. She did not attend. By February, 14 of the 23 relatives in the original Thanksgiving group chat had sent me messages of apology. I answered 2 of them, Aunt Marlene's, Cousin Whitney's. Aunt Marlene drove to Charlotte one Sunday in early February with a tray of biscuits and sat at my kitchen table for an hour saying very little. And when she got up to leave, she put both of her hands on my shoulders and said, "I owe you the rest of my life, and I know that, and I am going to spend it trying." I did not forgive her. I did not refuse her either. I let her come back the next month. On the 23rd of February, my brother Tate drove the 2 hours and 45 minutes from Raleigh to Charlotte without calling ahead. He sat in the waiting room of my clinic for 23 minutes while I finished a session with a 4-year-old patient. When I came out, he stood up. He was holding his 10-year-old daughter's hand. The daughter looked up at me and said, "Are you my aunt?" I said yes. I had not known that word would feel the way it felt to say out loud. Tate did not stay long. He said only one thing. "I counted the photographs last week. 38. 2. I'm sorry I didn't count sooner." I said the only thing I could honestly say. "You can come back, Tate. Bring her with you. Both of you." He nodded. He took his daughter's hand. They left. In March, a package arrived for me from Greensboro. Margot had printed an album, 50 original photographs, in a black leather coffee table book, with one line in her handwriting on the inside cover. "This is who you actually were. M." I put the album on my highest bookshelf, next to the white Adidas shoebox. 2 objects, 1 closed chapter. I turned 33 on the 12th of March, 2026. On that same morning, Brooke and I cut a green ribbon stretched across the front door of the Carolina Pediatric Voice Clinic in Charlotte. We were launching a scholarship. We called it the Spencer Sisters Scholarship for Cleft-Affected Children. The first endowment was $35,000, contributed jointly by Hudson, by me, and by a small estate Margot Hayes had quietly added in the week before her 70th birthday. The scholarship would cover speech therapy costs and post-surgical care for children in Mecklenburg County, whose families could not afford either. Eli was the first recipient. He stood beside me in a small navy blue sweater. He was 5 years old now. He held the oversized scissors with both hands. When I spoke to the small crowd of clinic staff and parents and reporters and Brooke and Hudson and a woman from the local NPR station, I said only a few sentences. My sister and I were raised to believe that the Spencer name belonged to only one of us. Today, we are giving the name to children whose names will be heard, no matter what they sound like, no matter what they look like, and no matter who tried to crop them out of a picture. Brooke signed the scholarship paperwork as Brooke Spencer.